Sometimes, love finds us in the most unexpected places, and when it does, it changes everything forever. From where are you watching this video? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Ethan Parker was the kind of man people admired from a distance, but rarely approached up close. Tall, with sharp blue eyes and a jawline cut like marble, he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had built empires with his own two hands. At just 32, he was already the CEO of one of New York's fastest-growing investment firms. His penthouse overlooked Central Park, his suits were tailored in Italy, and his schedule was so tight that even moments of silence had to be penciled in by his assistant. But no amount of wealth, luxury, or polished glass offices could mask the quiet emptiness that Ethan felt deep inside. He had all the money in the world, but when he came home at night, his walls echoed back nothing but silence. Every morning, Ethan's black Mercedes rolled up to the front of his Manhattan office, sleek and spotless. But every morning, something else was there too. Her. She sat just beyond the building's main doors, tucked against the stone wall as though trying to disappear. A faded gray coat hung off her slender frame, her hair tangled from the winter wind, and her hands were always cupped around a styrofoam cup. Not for coffee, but for spare change. She rarely asked for anything, only whispered a soft, "God bless you," to those who dropped coins inside. For weeks, Ethan noticed her. He never said a word. He would stride past in his perfectly polished shoes, his mind on numbers, contracts, and million-dollar deals. But her presence gnawed at him in a way he couldn't explain. One morning, snow fell heavily over Manhattan. The streets were slick, the city's chaos muffled under a white blanket. Ethan stepped out of his car, pulling his coat tighter around him, when he saw her again. Only this time, she wasn't sitting upright. She was curled on her side, shivering violently, her lips pale. The styrofoam cup had tipped over, coins scattered into the snow. Something inside Ethan shifted. Without thinking, he rushed forward. "Hey," he called, crouching beside her. "Are you all right?" Her eyes fluttered open, soft brown eyes, wide with fear and exhaustion. She tried to sit up, but her body trembled too hard. "You're freezing," Ethan muttered, slipping off his cashmere scarf and wrapping it around her shoulders. "You can't stay out here." I'll be fine," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please, don't worry." But Ethan did worry. Against every instinct that told him to get to his meeting, to keep walking like every other busy New Yorker, he slipped an arm beneath her and helped her to her feet. She weighed almost nothing. "You're coming with me," he said firmly. The woman shook her head weakly. I can't. People like you. You don't help people like me." Ethan's gaze softened. Well, maybe today's different. He guided her past the stares of his employees in the lobby, straight into the warmth of his office building. His assistant, Claire, nearly dropped her clipboard in shock. "Mr. Parker?" she gasped. "Cancel my morning meetings," Ethan ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Get a blanket, hot tea, and call a doctor." Now within minutes, the woman, who finally whispered her name was Lily, was sitting on the leather couch in Ethan's private office, wrapped in a blanket. Steam rose from the cup of tea in her hands, though she still trembled. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes never quite meeting his. "Nobody's ever stopped for me before." Ethan studied her. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, there was a fragile beauty to her, a softness that life hadn't completely stolen away. "Why are you out there, Lily?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the cup. "Life, it wasn't always like this. I had a home once, a family, but things happened. And now," she trailed off, eyes glistening with unspoken pain. Ethan leaned back, feeling a strange tug in his chest. He'd faced ruthless businessmen, hostile boardrooms, and market crashes. But sitting across from this fragile woman, he felt utterly defenseless. And for the first time in years, he wanted to know more. The office was unusually quiet. Normally, the sound of phones ringing and keyboards clattering filled the air, but that morning, even the staff seemed to sense something different. A billionaire CEO bringing a homeless girl into his office wasn't an everyday sight in Manhattan. Ethan ignored the whispers. He stood near the window, watching snowflakes drift past the glass, while Lily sat curled under the blanket, sipping her tea slowly. After a long silence, he finally asked, "Where are you staying? Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" Lily shook her head faintly. "Shelters are full. Sometimes I get a cot if I'm lucky. Most nights it's just the street." Ethan frowned, his hands tightening behind his back. The idea of anyone, let alone this fragile, soft-voiced woman, spending a night in the freezing New York winter, was unthinkable. "You can't stay outside," he said firmly. "Not another night." Lily's eyes lifted just enough to meet his. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." The question cut deeper than she realized. Ethan himself wasn't sure why he cared so much. All he knew was that every time he'd walked past her before, something about her haunted him. And today, when he saw her lying helpless in the snow, walking away, wasn't an option. "Maybe I don't know you yet," Ethan said quietly, "but I want to." Lily's lips parted, startled by his words. For a moment, she searched his face as if trying to find the catch. Some cruel trick, some hidden agenda. But all she saw was sincerity. The door clicked open, and Claire returned with the company doctor, a kind older man named Dr. Mason. He checked Lily's vitals, asked her a series of questions, and eventually concluded she was suffering from exhaustion and mild hypothermia. "She needs rest," Dr. Mason said. "Somewhere warm, somewhere safe. If she stays out there again, she won't last long." Ethan nodded grimly. As soon as the doctor left, he turned back to Lily. "You're coming with me tonight. I have more than enough space." Her eyes widened. "No, I can't. I don't want your pity." Ethan crouched down in front of her, lowering his voice. "This isn't pity. This is humanity. Let me help you." Tears welled in Lily's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "People don't just help me." "Not anymore." "Well," Ethan said softly, "maybe they should start." That evening, as Manhattan's skyline lit up with glittering lights, Ethan guided Lily into his sleek black Mercedes. She sat nervously, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the polished leather interior. "Relax," Ethan said gently, glancing at her. "It's just a car." "Just a car," she murmured, almost to herself. "This thing probably costs more than everything I've ever owned." Ethan chuckled faintly, but inside, her words stung. He had so much, and she had so little. The contrast was overwhelming. When they pulled into the underground garage of his luxury high-rise, Lily's breath caught. The marble floors, the shimmering chandelier in the lobby, the elevator that rose soundlessly to the top floor. It was a world she had never imagined being part of. When the penthouse doors opened, she froze. The space stretched out before her like something from a dream. floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, modern art pieces on the walls, furniture so elegant it looked untouched. I can't be here," Lily whispered, taking a step back. "This isn't for people like me." Ethan stepped closer, his expression soft but firm. "Lily, stop. Tonight, it is for you. You need a safe place, and you're staying here. End of discussion." Her eyes darted around the room, overwhelmed. Finally, she whispered, "It's beautiful. Too beautiful." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's just walls and furniture. What matters is that you're safe here." He led her to the guest bedroom, though guest hardly did it justice. The room was larger than most apartments, with a king-sized bed, soft sheets, and warm lighting. Lily stood frozen in the doorway, as though stepping inside might shatter the illusion. "You can stay here as long as you need," Ethan said gently. "I'll have fresh clothes brought for you tomorrow." Her throat tightened. No one had spoken to her with such kindness in years. She clutched the blanket around her shoulders, whispering, "Why are you doing this for me?" Ethan hesitated. The truth was complicated. He didn't fully understand it himself. All he knew was that something about her stirred emotions he thought he'd buried long ago. "Because," he finally said, "sometimes life gives us a chance to do something right. And I don't want to waste mine." For the first time, Lily smiled. It was small, fragile, but radiant. The kind of smile that could warm the coldest winter night. And Ethan knew in that moment that his life was about to change in ways he never expected. That night, Ethan barely slept. He paced the length of his penthouse, restless. Through the thin crack beneath the guest room door, he could see the faint glow of the bedside lamp. Lily was awake too. At one point, he almost knocked, almost asked her more about her life. But something told him she wasn't ready to share. Not yet. So he retreated to his study, pouring himself a glass of bourbon he didn't finish, staring out at the glittering city that suddenly felt hollow. The next morning, he knocked gently on the guest room door. "Lily, can I come in?" Her voice was soft. "Yes." He stepped inside to find her sitting on the bed, wrapped in the blanket. The night had softened her exhaustion, but her clothes were still ragged and her hair hung loose. On the nightstand sat the untouched tray of breakfast Claire had sent up earlier. "You didn't eat?" Ethan asked, concerned. She shook her head. "I'm not used to all this. It feels wrong, like I'm trespassing." "You're not trespassing," he said firmly. "You're my guest, and guests eat breakfast." A small laugh escaped her lips, surprising both of them. "You're bossy, you know that?" Ethan's mouth curved into a smile. "Occupational hazard. Comes with being a CEO." She picked up the toast reluctantly, nibbling on the corner as if it were forbidden fruit. Ethan watched, something stirring in him at the simple sight of her eating with hesitation and gratitude. Later that day, Ethan called in a favor from a designer boutique owner he knew. By evening, a selection of warm clothes and simple dresses arrived. Lily's eyes widened when she saw them. "These aren't for me," she whispered, backing away. "They're for whoever needs them," Ethan said calmly. "And right now, that's you." Her throat tightened. She touched the fabric gently, her fingers trembling. "It's been so long since I've had something new." When she emerged from the bedroom in a pale blue sweater and jeans that actually fit her, Ethan found himself speechless. She didn't look like the girl on the sidewalk anymore. She looked radiant. Still fragile, yes, but with a glimpse of who she might have been before life had dragged her down. "You look," Ethan began, then stopped himself. Compliments weren't something he gave easily, not sincere ones, but he found the words anyway. Beautiful. Color rushed to her cheeks. I don't remember the last time anyone said that to me. Well, Ethan said softly, then it's long overdue. Over the next few days, something unexplainable began to grow between them. Ethan rearranged his schedule, cutting back on meetings, spending more time at home. He and Lily shared dinners in the penthouse, sometimes talking for hours, sometimes sitting in silence that somehow felt comfortable. Lily told him fragments of her story, how she had once been a college student studying art history, how she'd fallen in love with the wrong man, someone who led her down a path of drugs and chaos, how she lost her apartment, her friends, her trust in the world. I tried to get back up, she admitted one evening, her voice trembling as she stared out the window at the glowing city. But once you fall far enough, people stop giving you chances. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her that wasn't true, that she still had a chance, that she was sitting right here, proving it. But instead, he simply said, maybe they were the wrong people. The right ones won't stop believing. She looked at him then, really looked, and something passed between them. Something warm. Something dangerous. One night after dinner, Lily wandered into the music corner of his penthouse. A grand piano sat gleaming beneath a spotlight. You play? She asked. Not really, Ethan admitted. It was my mother's. She used to fill the house with music when I was a kid. I kept it, but he trailed off, shaking his head. Haven't touched it in years. Tentatively, Lily sat on the bench and pressed a few keys. A soft, delicate melody emerged, hesitant at first, then flowing like water. Ethan froze, mesmerized. You play? He asked in disbelief. She nodded shyly. My mom taught me when I was little. Music. It's the only thing I never lost. Ethan stood behind her, watching her fingers dance across the keys. The sound filled the penthouse with a kind of warmth money could never buy. For the first time in years, the silence of his home was replaced by something living, something beautiful. When the last note lingered in the air, Lily turned, and their eyes met. Neither spoke, neither moved. But in that gaze, something shifted. Later, as Lily prepared to retreat to her room, Ethan stopped her at the door. Lily. She turned, her hand on the knob. Yes? Whatever brought you to that sidewalk, it doesn't define you. You're more than what happened to you. Her eyes glistened with tears she didn't want to shed. She whispered, You don't know how much I needed to hear that. And then she slipped inside, leaving Ethan staring at the closed door, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. Days turned into a week, and Lily slowly began to blossom in Ethan's world. She smiled more, laughed softly at his dry jokes, even teased him when he worked too late. The shadows in her eyes hadn't disappeared, but the light was slowly returning. For Ethan, life had never felt so alive. Meetings and profits no longer consumed him. What mattered was coming home and finding Lily at the piano or sitting on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. But New York is a city that notices everything. It started with whispers, employees speculating about the mysterious woman staying in Ethan Parker's penthouse. Then came the tabloids. A grainy photo of Ethan and Lily leaving his building appeared online under the headline, Billionaire CEO and Mystery Woman. Who is she? The article was merciless. It painted Lily as a gold digger, a con artist. The comments were worse. She looks homeless. He must be crazy. She'll ruin him. When Lily saw it, Her hands trembled so violently she dropped the phone. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, panic flooding her eyes. "I'm ruining your reputation." Ethan grabbed her shoulders gently but firmly. "Stop! None of that matters. It does matter," she cried, tears spilling over. "You have a life, a career, people who look up to you. And me? I'm nobody. I don't belong in your world." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Don't you dare say that. You are not nobody. You're the most real person I've met in years." But Lily shook her head, overwhelmed. I can't let you destroy yourself for me." That night, she packed the clothes he had given her into a small bag. When Ethan returned from a late meeting, the guest room was empty. She was gone. For the first time in years, Ethan panicked. He searched the streets near his building, asked around shelters, even called in private contacts. Nothing. Days passed, and Lily seemed to vanish into the vast city. He realized then how much she had changed him. Without her, the penthouse felt colder than ever. The silence was unbearable. He missed her laughter, her music, her presence that had filled the hollow parts of his soul. One snowy evening, while driving back from a board meeting he hadn't even listened to, Ethan spotted a familiar figure near a subway entrance. Huddled in the cold, clutching her knees, Lily looked smaller than ever. "Lily," he shouted, pulling the car over and rushing to her. She looked up, startled, her eyes wide with shame. "Ethan, you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," he said fiercely, kneeling in the snow beside her. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Her lips trembled. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, ignoring the cold biting his skin. "Don't you understand? It's not about what you think you deserve. It's about what I feel. And I feel that I can't lose you." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "Why me? Out of everyone in your world, why me?" Ethan's voice broke, raw and honest. "Because you remind me what it means to be human. Because with you, I'm not just a CEO or a man with money. I'm just Ethan. And that's all I want to be." For a long moment, they stayed like that. Two people from different worlds, kneeling in the snow, their hearts beating in the same rhythm. Finally, Lily whispered, "I'm scared." "So am I," Ethan admitted. "But I'd rather face the world with you than face it without you." And then, under the falling snow, he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of fairy tales or perfection. It was messy, trembling, full of tears and desperation. But it was real. It was love. Weeks later, the tabloids still buzzed. People still whispered, but Ethan didn't care. Lily began working with a local nonprofit that helped women get back on their feet. Slowly, she rebuilt her confidence, her sense of purpose. And Ethan, he found himself happier than he'd ever been, walking through Central Park, hand in hand with the woman everyone else underestimated. For the first time, Ethan realized that love wasn't about status or wealth or what the world thought. It was about finding someone who made you feel alive again. And in Lily, he had found exactly that. The air in Vermont carried a sweetness that Ryan Carter hadn't felt in years. The scent of pine trees, the warmth of the sun against the rolling green hills, the quiet hum of cicadas in the afternoon. It was a world far removed from the constant roar of Chicago's streets. Ryan had spent the last 7 years buried in courtrooms and law offices. As one of the youngest rising lawyers in his firm, he'd made a name for himself by being relentless, sharp, and willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of his career. Everything, including himself. But burnout had finally caught up to him. At 29, he felt twice his age. The sleepless nights, the endless deadlines, the constant battles with clients and colleagues, it had drained the joy out of him. So when his mentor suggested he take a leave of absence, Ryan found himself driving north until the skyscrapers gave way to small towns and quiet roads. He ended up in a sleepy Vermont village, the kind of place that looked like it belonged on a postcard. White picket fences, farmers markets, a single main street lined with shops, each one with a hand-painted sign. On his second day, wandering without purpose, Ryan stumbled into a bookstore tucked between a cafe and a flower shop. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and immediately he was struck by the scent of old paper and fresh coffee. And then he saw her. She stood behind the counter, arranging a stack of hardcovers with delicate care. Her auburn hair caught the sunlight streaming through the window, and her green eyes lifted when she noticed him. There was a gentleness in her expression that stopped him in his tracks. "Hi there," she said, her voice warm and lilting. "Welcome to Olivia's bookshelf. First time in?" Ryan cleared his throat, suddenly feeling out of place in his tailored city jacket. "Yeah, just passing through, actually." "Well, then you picked the right spot," she said with a smile. "Books and coffee. The cure for everything." Her name, as the sign suggested, was Olivia Bennett. She was 26, born and raised in Vermont, and had taken over the bookstore after her parents retired. To her, the shop wasn't just a business, it was a sanctuary, for herself and for anyone who wandered in. Ryan browsed the aisles, pretending to look at titles, but finding his attention drawn back to Olivia. There was something about her calm presence, the way she hummed softly as she worked, the way she greeted every customer with a genuine smile. It was the complete opposite of the cutthroat world he came from. Finally, Olivia approached him, holding a book. "You look like someone who needs this." Ryan raised a brow. "And what's that supposed to mean?" She handed him The Great Gatsby, a story about chasing things that don't always bring happiness. "Thought it might resonate." He smirked. "Are you always this perceptive with your customers?" "Only the ones who look like they're carrying the weight of the world," she replied softly. Ryan's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of vulnerability. She wasn't wrong. He bought the book, and instead of leaving, he found himself sitting at one of the small cafe tables tucked in the corner of the shop. Olivia brought him a cup of coffee, on the house, and before he knew it, they were talking. About books, about small towns, about city life. Hours passed without him realizing. When the sun dipped low outside the bookstore windows, Ryan finally stood, reluctant to leave. "Thanks. For today. I didn't know I needed it." Olivia's smile was soft, almost knowing. Sometimes the right place finds you before you even realize you're lost. As he stepped back into the Vermont evening, Ryan Carter, the man who had lived his life on deadlines and pressure, felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. And maybe, just maybe, the first spark of something more. The next morning, Ryan woke up in his rented cabin to the sound of birdsong and sunlight filtering through the curtains. For the first time in years, he hadn't set an alarm, hadn't rushed out of bed, hadn't reached for his phone the second he opened his eyes. Instead, he just breathed. But by mid-morning, he found himself wandering back toward the bookstore. He told himself it was for the coffee, maybe to actually read the book he'd bought. But deep down, he knew the truth. Olivia was behind the counter again, her hair pulled back in a loose braid this time. She looked up as he entered, and her face lit up in recognition. "Well, if it isn't my most mysterious customer," she teased. "Back for another round of therapy books?" Ryan chuckled. "Maybe just coffee today." She poured him a steaming cup, then leaned on the counter. "So, Mr. Passing Through, how long are you actually staying in our little town?" Ryan hesitated. He hadn't really decided. "A few days, maybe longer. I needed a break from work." "Ah," Olivia said knowingly. "The city chewed you up and spit you out, didn't it?" Ryan smirked, though her words hit closer to home than he'd like. "Something like that?" She didn't press further. Instead, she motioned toward the back of the shop. "Come on. You can't sit alone at that corner table again. Join me at the window. It's the best view." So he did. They sat across from each other at a small round table, sipping coffee while sunlight streamed in. Outside, life in the little Vermont town carried on slowly. Kids rode bicycles. A farmer's truck rattled past. A golden retriever lounged in front of the flower shop. Ryan felt untethered. In Chicago, every minute was scheduled, every second accounted for. Here, time seemed to stretch endlessly. "So what exactly do you do?" Olivia asked, curiosity shining in her eyes. "I'm a lawyer," Ryan replied, bracing himself for the usual mix of admiration and intimidation he got when people learned his profession. But Olivia just nodded. "That explains the tired eyes." He laughed. An actual laugh, not the forced chuckle he used in boardrooms. "You don't hold back, do you?" "Nope," she said cheerfully. "Life's too short for polite lies." Her honesty was disarming. He found himself talking more than he'd planned, about the long hours, the constant pressure, the way his job had consumed him. He didn't give her every detail, but enough for her to see the exhaustion behind his carefully controlled exterior. And Olivia, in turn, shared pieces of herself. How she dreamed of living in New York once, chasing an art degree. How her parents' health had pulled her back home. How eventually she realized the little bookstore meant more to her than any big city ambition. "It may not sound glamorous," she said, looking around the shop. "But here, I know every face. I know when someone's having a bad day and needs a story to escape into. And I know that this place matters." Even if it's small, Ryan studied her. The way her eyes softened when she talked about her town. The way she seemed rooted, steady, while he was adrift. It was grounding. Over the next week, Ryan found excuses to visit the bookstore every day. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes for a book recommendation, sometimes just to hear Olivia's laugh. They strolled through the town together, visited the farmer's market, and one evening, she invited him to a bonfire at the lake. The night sky was painted with stars, the water shimmering with moonlight. Ryan hadn't seen such a sight since he was a kid. "This is our little secret spot," Olivia whispered, sitting beside him on the dock. "When the world feels too heavy, I come here and remind myself it's bigger than my worries." Ryan glanced at her, the firelight flickering across her face. She looked serene, yet alive, her spirit glowing as brightly as the stars above. And in that moment, he realized something terrifying. He was falling for her, not in the rushed, transactional way relationships in the city had unfolded, not in the shallow way he'd dated for appearances. This was different. This was real. But along with the realization came fear. He wasn't meant to stay. His life, his career, his future, all of it was back in Chicago. Olivia was Vermont. She was roots, home, permanence. And he was anything but. Still, As she leaned her head on his shoulder, the crackle of the fire in the background, Ryan let himself forget the world beyond this summer. Because sometimes the best stories aren't about forever. They're about the moments that change you, even if only for a little while. The days slipped into a rhythm Ryan hadn't known he needed. Morning walks through the sleepy town, afternoons spent in the bookstore, evenings at the lake, or under the golden glow of cafe lights. He started to notice things he'd long ignored in the city. The way the sky changed colors during sunset, the way laughter carried across the town square, the way peace could be found in simple conversations. But what he noticed most was Olivia. Her laugh, unrestrained and genuine. Her habit of brushing hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The way she'd recommend books not just by genre, but by mood, almost like she could see through him. One Friday evening, Olivia convinced him to join her for the annual town fair. Strings of lights crisscrossed the square, music drifted from a live band, and the smell of funnel cakes filled the air. Families gathered, couples danced, and the whole place felt wrapped in warmth. Ryan, still wearing his city jacket, felt a little out of place until Olivia tugged him toward the carousel. "You can't come to our fair and not ride this," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Olivia, I'm a grown man," Ryan protested, though he was already laughing. "Exactly why you need it more than anyone," she shot back, pulling him onto one of the painted horses. As the carousel began to spin, Ryan found himself laughing harder than he had in years, his worries melting away with the music and the lights. Olivia laughed with him, and for a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. Later, as the fair quieted down, they walked along the outskirts of town, fireflies glowing in the dark fields. "Ryan," Olivia said softly, slowing her steps, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do I feel like you're running from something?" Her words pierced through him. He wanted to lie, to deflect with a joke, but the honesty in her eyes stopped him. "I am," he admitted. "I've spent years fighting for a career that I'm not even sure makes me happy anymore. I thought success would feel different, but it's just empty." Olivia listened quietly, her hand brushing against his as they walked. "Maybe you don't need to run from something. Maybe you just need to run towards something better." Her words lingered in the air between them, and before Ryan could stop himself, he turned to her. She looked up, her green eyes reflecting the glow of fireflies. Her lips parted slightly as if she knew what was coming. And then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both testing the fragile magic between them. But when Olivia's hand slid to his chest and Ryan pulled her closer, the kiss deepened, urgent, real, and full of every unspoken word they hadn't dared say. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia rested her forehead against his. "I've been waiting for that since the day you walked into my shop." Ryan's chest tightened with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. They spent the rest of the night lying in the grass, pointing at constellations, laughing about nothing, whispering about dreams. But beneath the joy, a quiet fear stirred in Ryan's heart. Because every passing day, he was falling deeper for Olivia. And every passing day, he knew his time here was running out. 2 weeks later, the call came. His firm in Chicago wanted him back. A major case was waiting, and his absence had stretched too long. That night, Ryan stood outside the bookstore, staring at the light glowing from inside. Olivia was closing up, humming softly as she stacked books. She looked so at home, so perfectly rooted in her world. And Ryan realized with a sinking weight that he was at a crossroads. Chicago or Vermont. Ambition or love. The life he'd built or the life he never knew he wanted. When Olivia stepped outside and saw him standing there, her smile faltered. "Ryan, what is it?" He swallowed hard. "They want me back." The words hung heavy in the cool night air, carrying with them the threat of an ending neither of them wanted. Olivia's expression stayed calm, but Ryan saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. She leaned against the bookstore doorframe, crossing her arms as though bracing herself. "So, you're leaving?" she asked softly. Ryan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I came here to escape, but Chicago is my life, my career. Everything I've worked for is there." "And what about here?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "What about us?" He wanted to answer, but the words tangled in his throat. Olivia looked at him for a long moment, then stepped closer. "Ryan, I'm not asking you to give up your dreams. But you need to ask yourself, are they really your dreams? Or just someone else's idea of success?" Her words cut deeper than any courtroom cross-examination ever had. He'd built his whole life chasing prestige, promotions, power. But standing here, staring into Olivia's tear-bright eyes, none of it felt as real as the past few weeks with her. "Olivia?" He reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "You've made me question everything I thought I wanted. And that scares me." Tears slipped down her cheeks, though her smile was gentle. "That's because you're human, Ryan. Not just a lawyer. And you deserve a life that makes your heart beat, not just your resume look good." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as though he could stop time. Her hair smelled faintly of lavender, and for a moment he imagined what forever with her might look like. But forever meant choices, and choices meant consequences. The next morning, Ryan sat by the lake alone. The water rippled in the early sunlight, and the quiet pressed in on him. In his hand was the business card his firm had sent. Numbers, dates, deadlines. He thought about Chicago, the sharp suits, the skyscrapers, the endless nights at his desk. And then he thought about Olivia, the bookstore, her laughter, the peace of Vermont nights. It wasn't just a choice between a city and a town. It was a choice between the man he had been and the man he wanted to become. That evening, Olivia closed up the bookstore and found Ryan waiting outside. He looked different somehow, lighter, calmer, resolved. "Well?" she asked cautiously. Ryan took a deep breath, stepping closer until their hands brushed. "I called them. I told the firm I'm not coming back. Not yet, at least." Her eyes widened, searching his face. "Ryan, are you sure?" "For the first time in years," he said with a small smile. "I'm sure of something. I don't know what the future holds, Olivia. But I know I don't want to lose what I've found here. What I've found with you." Her breath hitched, and then she threw her arms around his neck, kissing him with a mixture of relief and joy. The town square lights glowed above them, and the world seemed to fade away until there was only them. Summer passed, but Ryan stayed. He worked part-time remotely, spending his days helping Olivia at the bookstore, exploring the quiet corners of Vermont, and rediscovering what it meant to truly live. There were challenges, of course, adjustments, doubts that crept in late at night. But every morning, when Olivia handed him a cup of coffee with that smile of hers, he knew he'd made the right choice. Because sometimes love isn't about the grand gestures or the perfect plan. Sometimes it's about choosing the life that makes your soul feel alive. And that summer, Ryan Carter had chosen love. The house had stood at the edge of Charleston, South Carolina, for nearly a century. White columns framed The first snow of December drifted softly onto the streets of Portland, Oregon, wrapping the city in quiet white. At the corner of Hawthorne Boulevard stood a small brick cafe called Willow and Company, its windows glowing with warm yellow light. her laughter warming the space. Ethan sat near the corner, watching her. its name. The desert sky stretched endlessly above, filled with stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Out in Sedona, Arizona, far away from city lights, the world felt quieter, slower, and somehow more magical. no return date in sight. That evening, she met Ryan at a small desert overlook.